Hey everybody, I wanted to do a video discussing an article that I had been looking at. Um, it's about credentialism, right? The idea that, like, do people need a 4-year college degree? I happen to think that they don't. And I would like this idea of credentialism and higher education. I would like that to change culturally, the idea that people need to have a college degree in order to be able to get a job. Like, if you guys remember, like, just look back historically, okay? Back in the day, people would have mentoring and apprenticeships, right? And I know I've talked about this on this channel before. I haven't done a video specifically on this topic, but I do feel that it is important. So yeah, back in the day, if you wanted to be like a blacksmith or something, rather than going to college, you mentored under somebody and you learned the profession through on-the-job training and experience, sort of like vocational training. You could be an apprentice under somebody for several years before you become very good at it, and you are able to go out into the profession on your own. I feel like that higher education, college, is mostly a scam nowadays. It is incredibly expensive. Look up tuition, look up the cost of like textbooks, look at student loan debt. For example, I do not feel that having a college degree is like a sign of intelligence anymore. If anything, I think that the longer someone's in school, probably the less intelligent they actually are, right? The less independent thinkers that they are, the more conformist they probably are. And I think that just the way that the education system is set up, especially in America, is like schools are set up, they're designed sort of like very similar to prisons. So, for example, like independent creative thinking is not encouraged. Like, I remember as a kid, imagination is like beaten out of you. You know, you are not encouraged to be like an individual. You aren't encouraged to express yourself and your own ideas. You are yelled at for doing that, and you are taught repetition. How good are you at memorizing and repeating what other people are telling you from a position of authority? And so I think that you can look at things like the Stanford prison experiments, right? Where you have this inflated view of somebody that is in a perceived position of authority, to the point where you would listen to them even if they were telling you to do something that you knew was immoral or wrong. Order followers, right? And so I feel like that this idea of like, and just look at what happened in 2020, this over-reliance on the so-called experts, right? Experts say, who are these experts? What do they actually know? Does being an expert in a field automatically make you right? You know, like, it just makes no sense. And it kind of goes against how things have gone in the past, where like the experts tend to be wrong, right? You can look back and it's usually the people who are not the experts that end up being right, or coming up with something creative or different or unique, or a different way of solving a problem that the so-called experts or the majority consensus didn't see or was wrong about. And so, yes, I don't think that college is actual higher education anymore. I don't believe it teaches critical thinking. I don't think people go there to learn how to think. I believe they go there to get a piece of paper so that they can get jobs. And if you look at the way that the job market has been structured, degrees are required for everything nowadays. However, I remember, you know, I would have been, if I hadn't dropped out of high school, I would have been the class of 2007. And I remember distinctly, we had the economic crash from 2008 to 2010. And I remember that at that point, I was working at a law firm, and I was learning how to be a paralegal. I was working as a receptionist first and then a paralegal. So during that time, like, I had a good job. I had like a I don't know. I'm not sure if I had benefits. I think I had health benefits, but I had like a 401k and stuff. And I had friends who had gone to college after school, unlike myself, and had a degree or whatever, and like they would be working at like Starbucks, because that degree really didn't mean anything if you have no actual job experience. It's literally like a piece of paper. So that's the kind of thing that was happening. So you had a lot of people that were like, oh, why didn't I wish I had done things differently or whatever. I have all this student loan debt. I have this little piece of paper, but I have no actual real life experience. And I'm having difficulty getting an actual job that I was promised this degree would help me get. And so I think a lot of people started realizing that there are a lot of just asinine, let's be real, college degrees, college programs, college classes, like feminist theory. What is that? How does that contribute to society at all? You're not producing anything of value or utility. It's literally intellectual masturbation. So I think that it's kind of pointless. And there's stuff like that where it's just a waste of people's time. Those people are being taken advantage of. They are spending money on something that ultimately, number one, means nothing, and number two, produces nothing of value. And it just seems like there's this huge scam right now in the academic sphere of this type of thing, where these people have an ideology and they want to be able to get paid to just espouse the ideology to other people. So they go into education, they become teachers, and then they start, bringing this nonsense into school. So no, I do not think that we're teaching critical thinking skills. I do not think that having a degree or being in like the school institution, like a literal prison, is helping anybody, specifically women. I think that women are meant to be mothers and nurturers and, wives. I know that's going to be really shocking and controversial to some people to say that that's how women are naturally built and shouldn't be put in like the position of having to do critical thinking or like make decisions of importance. Not to say that their advice and input wouldn't be valued or needed, or even in many cases better than a man. However, I think that you can be a woman, you can work, but you should also be able to have a family. I don't think it has to be both. Like, I don't think you should have to choose between being a career woman and having a family and being a mother. I think that women should be able to do both. But I feel like women should be encouraged to first have families when they are young, and then maybe do like apprenticeships or mentoring and learning to do things that they actually enjoy doing. Not because they felt like they've been told, oh yeah, if you want to find a husband, go into college and into a man's field or something, which is silly and ridiculous. How many women are going to be satisfied doing like STEM? Maybe some, but not most, not all. And again, these colleges are robbing women of the best years of their lives while giving them like nothing of value. So that was sort of like a tangent. As you guys know, I can't stay focused. I get easily distracted. But this is the actual article that I thought was interesting, although unsurprising to myself. It is a bit like musical chairs right now. Big employers like Google and IBM no longer require college degrees in a tight job market, but experts warn that that may not last. So obviously, I think that for the people who talk about so-called equity and inclusion and all of this other nonsense, they have a love of authority and credentialism and the experts. If you don't have a bachelor degree, they feel like you should be completely excluded from these jobs. Obviously, I'm not saying you should be able to be a doctor without a degree, but maybe you could get like a 2 or 3 year degree and then spend 8 years in an apprenticeship with a doctor doing actual on-the-job training, seeing it in person rather than reading about it in books. And I know that they have internships and things like that. I understand that's part of the process. but I do feel like there should be an option for people who maybe like school doesn't work for them. That isn't how they learn. They need the hands-on on the job thing. And I think that there should be a path open to people for that, for mentorship, for apprenticing, that will still allow you to become a professional without a silly piece of paper, you know? So the article says, dropping kids off at college has been a milestone for parents just as much as their teens, but is getting a degree going the way of bell bottoms, cable vision, and calling someone on the phone? I believe it should. I think that should be the case for most things. Not everything, obviously, but most things. And even for being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, I still think there should be a path open for apprenticeships and mentoring, and people who have gained on-the-job experience. Because I can tell you, as somebody that worked in the legal system, there were a lot of people, associate attorneys fresh out of college, that had no actual experience and didn't know what the hell they were doing. It's not until they got jobs that they started learning this stuff. And it's like, the things that you learned at school, you easily could have just learned by like doing it, or by like apprenticing under somebody who is doing it and working with them and watching how they do it and learning that way. Like, I feel like that should be a thing like it used to be before this obsession with a piece of paper. With a strong economy, haha, is that a joke? And an excess of jobs with few workers to take them, big companies like Google, IBM, and Delta Airlines have eased up on educational requirements in an effort to find hires based on skills and experience instead. Like, that's super important. I feel like there are a lot of people out there who are, and I'll include myself as like one of these people, not to toot my own horn or anything like that, but there's a lot of people that are very smart. And if you just kind of throw them in a situation, they can learn. They're just good learners. As long as they have somebody mentoring them and teaching them, like, they can learn anything, any skill. There are a lot of people like that. And college doesn't work for them. It bores them. It's not stimulating. It isn't interesting. It's just listening to a bunch of garbage from academics who really don't know what they're talking about either, for the most part. Not all, but most, I would venture to say. With a 4-year degree perhaps seemingly not as crucial for Americans climbing the career ladder as it once was, thank God, young people might be rethinking the need for higher education as well. Good, because it is 100% a scam. These people are indentured servants for life. The cost of the college education, it's not worth it. You are paying so much money in interest on student loan debt. I've heard about people who are $100,000 in debt in the hole, and that compounds sometimes, so it just gets worse. Like, if you're in a situation where you take out $100,000 in student loans to get a degree, and then getting out of college with said degree, you're not making enough money, or the job market is really bad and you can't get a job, you have to defer your student loan payments. And it's like, what if you never get to the point where like you're getting what you thought you were paying for, right? Where it starts paying off for you. I think that people are starting to see this scam, and it's why a lot of these younger lefties, they want to vote for somebody who they think is going to give them student loan debt forgiveness, which, by the way, is never going to happen, because these people don't actually represent you. They represent their donors, and you are not that. So you're not going to get your loan forgiveness, your little debt jubilee. It isn't happening. People lie to you. They make promises they're not going to keep. It's what politicians do. Okay. So continuing on, they say, it's a bit like musical chairs right now, says Alicia Modestino, an associate professor and labor economist at Northeastern University. Quote, we're seeing a lot of people shift jobs, move up in the labor market. That's great. However, she warns, with the Fed raising interest rates in an effort to quell inflation, which they just called a booming job market or whatever, booming economy previously in the same article, Americans need to be prepared for the job market to slow in coming months. Pretty soon the music's going to stop. So you want to have some place to land that's going to be good for the long term. The tech industry in particular has been struggling with a talent shortage since pre-pandemic times. Google and 150 other companies use the tech giant's online college alternative program to train and hire entry-level workers, reports the Wall Street Journal. And according to CNBC, IBM doesn't ask for a bachelor degree for half of its U.S. roles. Good. Bank of America also doesn't request college degrees for most of its entry-level jobs, while Delta says degrees for pilot applicants are quote-unquote preferred but not required. Guys, I remember when I was a paralegal and I didn't have a degree, and you have to compete with people who have like a bachelor's degree and, that were like multilingual or bilingual, whatever. And it was just like ridiculous. That kind of thing, like, it's just silly to require like a 4-year degree to be a paralegal. It's not necessary, and it isn't needed. But anyways, I feel like it's just like wasteful. And that's not to say that you couldn't take classes if you want to get smarter or better at something, but traditional higher education, like these colleges, these college programs, I don't think it's that. Like, there are ways of learning things, there, like a good example of this is, I forget what it's called, but there's, this thing where you can kind of like design a course and you can sell it yourself, right? It's like a workshop type thing. And then you can pay it and like learn how to do this shit. That kind of thing can be helpful. Where you're like paying to take like one class for like the one thing that you're interested in or actually need. You don't have to take all these stupid electives that have nothing to do with like what you want to do because, you have to have X amount of credits, like as a requirement. I hated that. It's like the nonsense busy work crap that they give you where they make you take this stupid stuff that is unrelated to what you actually want to do. Like, you should be able to only take the classes for things that, like, you're going to use, that will be relevant to you. Like, I'm sorry, but why do I need to take advanced algebra? What? How would that help? Unless, like, you're going into that kind of field, like, why should you need to have that? Like, you're never gonna need to have that. It's just silly. Applicants for thousands of government jobs in the state of Maryland no longer need a bachelor's degree. Instead, they can submit any relevant work experience, military training, or educational certificates. There you go. I think that is going to be the future, and I think it makes far more sense than all this other nonsense. This shift arrives during a thriving labor market with low unemployment and high job vacancies. Although there's been talk of that coming to an end, the Labor Department's latest jobs report indicate that hiring slowed only slightly in November. Modestino adds, there's precedent for this approach. During the Great Recession, employers responded by focusing on skill requirements, in addition to educational requirements, since there were more college-educated workers available to them. And then they say this may not be an actual culture shift, but I think it should be. So obviously they're saying, oh yeah, should parents stop putting cash away for their kids' college tuition? A big scam, right? Modestino is pessimistic about whether big employers relaxing their educational credential requirements is truly part of a cultural shift. And with recent shifts in the economy, she has concerns about the future of work. Looking at where we are in terms of the business cycle and what the Fed's doing with interest rates, there is a potential for us to overshoot and tip into a recession. Tip into one? I swear, the lack of like awareness is remarkable. This could trigger a recession. Guys, like, we're in a recession. My God. Wow. Okay, so like a degree in criminal justice. Again, it depends, I think, on like what you're going to do. I don't think that you need a degree for everything criminal justice related. I think that this idea is silly, and in there, I'll bring up another article for people just to kind of show you. So here's the same type of thing with the New York Times talking about police departments lure recruits with bonuses and attention. So I'm not paying for the New York Times, but I've already read the article, and what they were saying was that because of what happened in 2020, you all know what I'm talking about, St. Floyd. Because of that, there's like low morale with police. So now they're trying to create ways to make incentives for people to like want to become a police officer. And some of that, of course, is like loosening the certain things that were required before. Again, I feel like that is stuff you can learn on the job. Like being a police officer, you apprentice under a police officer. You know, you have a mentor. That's what they do. They pair you up with somebody that is more experienced. You're a rookie, you learn from them, and you learn on the job. Like, that's how it used to be. But no one wants to be a cop anymore because they know if there's a little incident that happens and the media talks about it and paints you as a bad person, no one will support you, and people will talk about defunding you and all of that. And they're using this, of course, to push for nonsensical things like sending social workers, you know, community policing. Like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's just allow a mob to control like what happens with matters of life and death and like self-defense. Oh, that sounds wonderful. So the next time someone breaks into your house and is trying to hurt you and your family, we'll just send a social worker who has had racial sensitivity training. It's do we really want to live in that world? Honestly, guys. Anyways, this has been a very long video, but I just kind of wanted to talk about my hatred for credentialism, you know, and people who put on a costume and think that that somehow makes them special people. It doesn't, you know. I can put on a white lab coat too. It doesn't make me a special person. It doesn't make me smarter than anybody else. It's like, oh, you went to school, you learned how to conform and repeat things and memorize stuff. You were given a piece of paper. Now you put on the costume every day and you're somehow an authority and an expert. I think it's silly, and I think that anyone could learn to become an authority and an expert on something by simply being mentored. And I think that we should be focusing more on that, because actually I think that that's something that hasn't been a thing lately. Like that young people haven't been mentored by older people that are more experienced, more mature. And because of that, like you see these young people that are in this sort of state of like stunted childhood, right, where they've been sort of like infantilized through things like going to being in an institution, a prison for that long, where they are sort of infantilized, they're babied, the participation trophies, whatever. It's like they never learn grit, you know, they never learn through the harsh experience of just being thrown to the wolves and like, oh, let's see if you fucking survive. You know, that's where character is built, and you actually like learn how to do things and you learn skills that are universally applicable. Okay, so that's the end of the rant. That's the end of the video. I will put the link to that article in the video description. You can read for yourself, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that college degrees are necessary? Do you think that it's something like mentorships and apprenticeships and on-the-job learning and sort of like vocational training would be better for most, if not all, cases? Or do you think that people need to go get the piece of paper and put on the costume and stuff in order to be smart? Read.